Okay.
Yeah, I don't think.
All right. Terrific. So Michael and I were just having a conversation. I was sharing a story from my own life, and I mentioned that when I got some troubling news that required a very I would almost call it a momentous decision, that I decided I was not going to make any decision for 24 hours. And as much as my body was screaming for resolution, I just knew that no, do nothing for 24 hours. And Michael, when I said that, how did you respond when I told you how I responded to this situation?
Yeah, I thought that you were doing a wonderful job at meeting yourself where you were and recognizing that having that type of news, that unexpected, it was a violation of expectancy, which triggered some sort of threat physiology. And I don't know how you actually responded, if you physiologically went into a collapse or a shutdown, or if you were highly, highly mobilized. But either way, you consciously said, you know what, I'm not going to make any decision. And I'm going to give myself time to come back into, in my language, a safe physiology that would actually support you thinking more clearly and seeing the situation from a more level-headed place, and maybe even seeing a creative solution to it. So I looked at it as that's really smart. That's meeting yourself where you are.
And the podcast that you appeared on, our parenting podcast, we talked, I think, in the podcast as well about what Andrew refers to as the pause of
Yeah.
just being able to take that break. And then we talked about that, and then from there we raised this interesting juxtaposition or question, which was, I'll put it over to you, and you could frame the question. And we have not talked at all. We started before we could talk about it. I said, Michael, we're not going to leave this on the cutting room, the training field. We're going to just talk about it. But why don't you frame the inquiry?
Yeah. So the inquiry was, when is it a pause or when is it procrastination, which in my language would be sort of avoidance.
Right.
And there can certainly be a subtle difference in the heat of the moment, and also over time. Like, am I just still pausing, or because I'm still not back into my safe place, or am I avoiding the challenge that's really in front of me because I don't want to go there, or I'm actually don't feel resourced enough to actually go into that right now. And that's tricky, right? So I don't know if there's a clear black and white answer to that, but I think, again, that comes back to you meeting yourself where you really are.
And so let's tease this out, because this isn't a theoretical. It's not theoretical. We're constantly having stuff that we'd rather avoid, and we're constantly having times where we respond before we're actually, ready, fire, aim.
Yes.
Responding
Yes.
before we've actually gotten it. And I'll give you the first thing that came to mind and put over to you briefly is I could feel it energetically, which is how I generally experience life. That the avoidance is there is a constriction,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm literally restricting, putting it back into kind of, I don't call it a safety thing. Is that there's a threat out there, and I am constricting back in it. So, and I don't know. I mean, we're on a recording. I don't know how this will be presented, but for me, it's like this. It's like collapsing into myself, and it's a back and an in.
Mm-hmm.
And where in this case, energetically, what I experienced was it was just more of an exhale.
Yeah,
So
more of an opening up.
right. So that's one way that I experienced the difference. So I'll put it back over to you. How would
Again,
you?
I would say that's you really being aware of your physiology, and in what we're looking at, you just exemplified it. So this action
Could you describe the
resembles,
people that are
yeah, the
listening?
action of rolling inward and sort of folding is a body that's right at the brink of being overwhelmed by threat.
Wow.
It's just being overwhelmed. There's just too much. It's almost in its own way a life-threatening situation. It's just so much. Whereas when you did the other gesture, you were opening your shoulders and you were showing your ventral side. you were like, okay, I've got this. Okay, I don't know. And what we were talking about earlier is you don't know how it's going to play out, but you feel resourced enough, grounded enough, safe enough that you're willing to step into the unknown in your language because it is unknown and you don't know how it's going to play out. But you're in your body, you're prepared. It's there.
So if you were going to give the benefit of all that you are and all that you know, all your life experience to people, and they wanted to be able to distinguish the difference of when they're just avoiding, and then in all of that, and I'm sure you could get into all of the physiology that goes with that. I mean, I know what it's like from a mindset. I just constantly, my one of my partners used to say it's like when you've lost your wallet and you go through the whole day and you know something's wrong, but you don't know what it is, and then suddenly you remember what it is, but all day you know you've lost your wallet. So, there's kind of the consequences of procrastination is how
Mhm.
does if how what should people be looking for to know that to be able to distinguish the difference?
I think it's tapping into how you're actually feeling,
So say a little more.
right? And
Yeah, say more.
how you're actually feeling. So I think you did a really wonderful job of articulating how you go by energy. You go by attention or a restriction or not, a freedom and an openness. So I think we each can come up with our own what we're really paying attention to. Doesn't have to be energy, doesn't have to be tension. It might be I feel the way I'm breathing. It might be I notice tension in my face, or I notice where I'm putting my attention. So I think my answer to that would be, well, what's your resource that you can become aware of? For me, it would be how I'm carrying myself, similar to yours.
Mm.
And it might be tied into my sort of mood and overall energy, but tapping into that and noticing those changes. And then that's what gives me the information as to when do I want to believe a story that I'm telling myself, or when do I want to challenge that story, right? Like, so am I procrastinating? When I think of that and sort of see it, whatever it's tied to, like I don't want to do that. Well, is that what's going on now when I just imagine that? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. That could be procrastination. But again, I think it's very tricky. I think it's very tricky, but I think the resource is awareness of your own body, your own breathing, your own energy, your own whatever your thing is.
So this is interesting, and it'll probably lead to another. Maybe this will be the next thing we talk about, except something else will captivate our attention. We'll talk about that. But I was thinking in my own case, it's knowing yourself, whatever that means. All of that, and I hesitate to use that because it has so many connotations and goes so many places. But for me, for instance, I know myself that it's almost like I get a panic that comes over me when I'm facing that situation, and I don't want the tension, and I want to make a decision now. The
Mhm.
panic's there. It's almost like I feel the panic. And so my two ways of dealing with it are to run away from it and saying, I'll talk about this tomorrow, or I got to make a decision now. And at least I'm in control. Right.
Yeah, or at least you've gotten rid of that feeling in that
Exactly.
moment too, right? In
So
that
there's,
moment, at least, oh, I ended that feeling. And that's the art of all of this, is to actually, that's what the pause is. That pause is that ability to be with that discomfort, to be with that sensation, to be with that, whatever you might be thinking, that harmful thought. That's the pause, is to be able to be with that long enough that you regroup and that you find a way to reassure your whole being, who you are, that you actually are okay enough to now make a decision or to say something or to walk away because you're still not prepared. You're still not in your space. You're still not back to who you are.
so two things I want to do, and then we'll cut this. We'll hit the pause button on this conversation because I want to seed, SEED, seed the next one was something that just occurred to me. So one, because it's the first time we formally recorded, whether anything comes out of this, and I don't know what'll come before it or whatever, is could you just contextualize this within the polyvagal framework of just kind of put this into the larger framework of how this fits into this beautiful, this beautiful.
Yeah. So something happens, right? In this case, some violation of expectancy, something we weren't prepared for, something we didn't see coming, some challenge emerges. Okay. We will have a bodily reaction to that. We will have some physiological change because at the level of the brainstem, all of this information is coming in, and the brainstem is taking in this information and it's making reflexive evaluations, safe, unsafe. This connects me to me and the world, or this is disconnecting. This is what I expected, or this is a violation, right? So it's bringing in all this information. It's making these reflexive, adaptive evaluations, safe, unsafe, unsafe. Changes heart rate, changes breathing, changes how all of the organs are being regulated. So you have this physiological change in your body. That sends signals back to the brainstem, which now you may, and it starts moving up into the insula, and you might become aware now of these changes, which in your case, you've articulated. I have tension. Okay, so now you have this tension, and now we make up some narrative to make sense of how we're feeling, or why this is like this, or why what they did was wrong, or why, we make up a story to explain how we're feeling. And then at the same time, we might not like how we're feeling, and this narrative might feed more into the feeling, and we get even more going to where now all we want to do is end how we're feeling, and we might react, we might run away, or we might collapse because it's so much coming at us and so much going on. And the narrative just keeps refueling the physiology. And now we're overwhelmed, and the body says, I can't take anymore. I need to go hide and hunker down. So that's the progression. The pause, right, would be where in that pause, it's not just a pause. It's a pause. And in that pause, we're bringing our attention somewhere out of the story. If we stayed in that pause and we just kept spinning the story, the pause wouldn't really get us anywhere. That's how I'm looking at it. So the pause is actually more than a pause. It's a pause, and it's bringing our attention to some other resource that helps reassure our body we're actually okay, which gives us a chance to make up a new story, or to choose a new behavior, or to react in a different way that's more aligned with who we really want to be.
So I am going to just call it. There's something I want to tell you, but I realized what I was going to mention, I think, is something I want to talk to you off the tape for whatever it's worth, or whatever. No, I'm actually going to put it in now, and then we'll cause it. So what I'm reminded of is something that I heard myself say. And sometimes I like to quote myself, and I'm surprised that guy's really smart. Oh, that's you. Oh, really? But it happens, obviously there's the flip side. But I heard myself saying to one of my coaching clients that I want to make decisions out of peace and preference rather than fear and compulsion.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that is a great theme that maybe that we could just adopt, and saying, how does this relate to the fact that all of us, we're obsessed with making the right decision, and it's really about making whatever seeming decision we're making from the right place.
That's right.
And
love that.
And so anyway, maybe that's what we'll pick up, but I'm going to end this now and say, this was a lot of fun. God knows if we'll see the light of day, but I sure had a good time.
Likewise.